Chapter 2. There was a cozy little cafe at the entrance of the tennis hall. Nothing fancy, but it had its charm. With the 3 tables and a couple of chairs at the bar, it should be the perfect spot for guests to cool down after a hard game. But for some reason, it was mostly empty. Still, the coffee, like everything else at Bonita, was exceptional. Having received a steaming mug from the barista, I settled under 2 palm trees, spread the Rio Times on the table, and had a perfect view of both the walkway and tennis courts. According to the wall clock, I had a few minutes before assistant coach Archie McLean would begin the day's first lesson. As I carefully sipped the hot brew, the front page caught my interest. Bold headlines blasted the latest scandals, with corruption spreading like wildfire through Brazil's society. That story kept repeating itself. After flipping through it for a while, I lost interest, and my thoughts drifted to more pressing matters, like the souls that could still be saved. At 10 o'clock on the dot, Archie emerged from our office with a training bag slung over his shoulder. For the day, the reddish-brown hair was combed back in a shiny slick. It looked good. I knew hair was a touchy subject for the young Scot. On one occasion, I tried to call him Rusty. I only did that once. What I intended as a harmless remark ended up being taken as an insult of the worst kind. He went ballistic. I folded the paper for cover and followed his steps towards Court 3. According to schedule, there were 2 lessons before lunch. First, Mrs. Davidson, who, being in her 60s, didn't exactly have a big future ahead. Still, what she lacked in youthful agility, she more than made up for with a tricky serve that could land just about anywhere. I suspected she was a feared opponent on her home court in Adelaide. Archie's next student, Mrs. Richards, offered completely different challenges. Considerably younger, on the right side of 40, she had a body as close to physical top form as one could get. Even if her starting position was leagues better, her playing resembled that of a rake. Despite the lack of natural talent, she was admirably persistent and engaged in the training. Mrs. Richards, Kathy, as she preferred to be called, often required the coach's physical demonstration, preferably close behind and guiding her as they struck together. Archie had invested countless hours trying to salvage her notoriously bad backhand. Once Archie disappeared, I left the newspaper on the table and headed towards the staff quarters. Shortly after, I was outside his bungalow with a master key. Just as I was about to put it in the lock, I hesitated. The feeling that I was crossing a line I shouldn't overwhelmed me. Shaking off the unease, I inserted the key and entered. There wasn't much light, and I gave my eyes a few seconds to adjust. Taking in the surroundings, the place matched his personality perfectly. Mountains of dirty laundry dominated the floor, awaiting some brave soul to tackle the chore. What little space remained was littered with magazines, beer cans, and the aftermath of late-night burger bonanzas. Technically, I had plenty of time, so I should have been calm and methodical, but I wasn't, not at all. I went straight for the jackpot and headed for the medicine cabinet in the kitchen. Despite my obsessive snooping, like pouring out and inspecting every single tablet in a bottle of headache pills, I found nothing that couldn't be legally bought at any old pharmacy. A glimmer of hope began to take root, and I pressed on with renewed energy. I went through the fridge, the freezer, the cabinets above the sink, and even the underside of the cutlery drawer. Every package of dry food was meticulously examined. In the back of the pantry, I found a bag of flour, its intended purpose a mystery. Archie baking was as likely as a devout Muslim switching to pig farming. But being a thorough person, I stuck a knife into the flour, swirled it around, and made sure it was free of any naughty stuff. A battered beer coaster on the kitchen table caught my eye. I picked it up and looked at the sloppy drawing on the back. Beneath 2 crossed tennis rackets was a hastily written inscription: Archie and John's Sporting Goods. He had made that sketch one late night in Rio. The basic idea was sound. Avoid the classic mistake all washed-up stars did by focusing solely on their old game. Instead, tennis would be our public face, complemented by a carefully selected range of other sports. The final choices were still undecided, but including a dozen of the major ones seemed like a smart move. Start small, nothing fancy, just a moderately sized store, and then expand into a chain. At least that was the general idea. But perhaps the partnership wouldn't work out. We had big problems figuring out whether the firm should be called Archie and John's or John and Archie's. I hummed thoughtfully at the memory, put the coaster back, and continued my search. In the bathroom, I removed the toilet lid and checked the water tank. Nope, nothing there. At the bottom shelf of the bathroom cabinet, I found a toiletry bag that I squeezed to make sure nothing was sewn into the lining. That operation was also pointless because there was no way Archie would tear the bag open only to sew it back. I just couldn't picture it. For my finale, I flipped the toilet brush holder upside down, but didn't find any mysterious taped packages there either. I had saved the bedroom for last, except for the unpleasant discovery of a toilet roll and crumpled papier-mâché figures. It was also empty. Indecisively, I looked at the clock and felt that budding hope again. The good feeling, the bright optimism, was probably the kind an anxious mother experienced when she realized her chemically dependent teenager had finally come to his senses and enrolled in Bible school. It was just a matter of principle that I stuck my hands into the pillowcase and felt around. Nothing there. The nasty rumors that had been circling around were unfounded. When I stuck my head under the bed, I encountered a combat-style knife. Tucked between the frame and mattress, it was readily accessible to the bed's occupant. I loosened it. Gleaming in black leather, the sheath had a compartment on top for the sharpening stone. A leather strap around the handle held the blade in place. I snapped the button with my thumb and drew the whole thing out. The blue-black blade shimmered ominously. With limited knowledge of knives, I just noted its menacing look before sliding it back into place and securing the button. The smaller button for the sharpening stone came next. I opened it and tilted the whole contraption sideways to make it fall into my hand. Nothing happened. I shook it gently, but the stone had decided to stay home today. I held it up to the ceiling lamp and looked inside. At the bottom, I could see some crumpled plastic. I grabbed a toothpick from the kitchen and pried it out. It was a small Ziploc bag. Inside, 3 yellow tablets could be seen through the translucent plastic. 3 happy campers, just lying there and cuddling up to each other. They might have been mistaken for tiny breath mints. That is, until you saw the stamped smiley face. This was when the hopeful mother would throw up a hand to cover her O-shaped mouth and start crying hysterically. I pressed my thumb and forefinger hard on the bag. After a while, the little death-bringers were ground to a yellowish dust that I flushed down the toilet. The empty bag went back into the compartment, and I slid the knife back under the bed. Before leaving, I circled a few times and made sure I hadn't left any traces. Passing the kitchen, I took another look at the drink coaster. Things probably would have worked out if he hadn't been such a pain about the company name. John and Archie's rolled off the tongue 1,000 times better. I let out a heavy sigh and thought long and hard about our friendship. The foundation was not rock solid anymore, that was for damn sure. Slowly, I set the coaster back in its place, pressing down slightly before letting go. Satisfied that everything was spick and span, I locked the door with 2 turns and stepped out into the sunshine. Melinda Worth's office sat on the top floor of Bonita's main building, an imposing structure of steel and glass that had once graced the covers of architectural magazines due to its avant-garde design. As I entered the grand lobby, the air was filled with the soft murmur of newly arrived guests lounging in the waiting area. Plush velvet sofas dotted the space, and a large crystal chandelier hung overhead, casting playful shadows on the polished marble floor. I navigated through this maze of luxury, walking past our much-lauded centerpiece, a gigantic indoor fountain where water jets rhythmically shot up in a hypnotic pattern. At the reception, Angelica, with the ever-present bright smile, efficiently managed check-ins. I waved, but her attention was fixed firmly on the computer screen. Deciding against the busy elevator, I took the stairs, counting them off in my head as I climbed. Reaching the top, I found Melinda's door open and went right in. The giant polished mahogany desk was free from things normal people needed at work. Computers, stacks of paper, and forgotten coffee mugs were conspicuously absent. A laptop, a pen holder, and a desk pad. That was it. The remaining space could easily fit a small aircraft. On the wall behind her hung an oil painting of her father, Lord Worth. As usual, I checked for similarities. It was hard to tell if the painter had botched the job or if Melinda took after her mother. Either way, the portrait showed just how different they were. By any measure, she was a perfect 10, even if the years started adding up. Her shoulder-length dusky hair had been trimmed in a contemporary style that made her look quite a bit younger. In the darkness of the night, she would effortlessly pass for 50. The first thing I noticed was her blue jumpsuit. It was really something else. Generous amounts of chest and shoulders were exposed, held together by only 3 thin strips of fabric. Behind her back, there had been whispers about the outfits being too daring for someone her age, but I thought they suited her just fine. A beautiful woman in no hurry to get old, nothing wrong with that. The image was completed by a dozen bracelets on her wrist, which jangled merrily as she lifted the hand in greeting.
Hello, John.
She pushed the spectacles up to rest on her forehead and put some documents aside. Gesturing energetically toward the guest chairs, the bracelets now performed a complete symphony.
Sit down for heaven's sake.
After giving me a brief look, she swiveled in the chair, showcasing her well-preserved body and profile. The way her breasts defied gravity made me question whether there had been surgery or if it was a matter of some new wonder bra. She closed her eyes for a second, as if to refocus, and then waved impatiently.
Okay, spill it. What did you find?
Briefly, the image of pills in a plastic bag surfaced, but I shook it off and looked her straight in the eyes. Nothing. The place was empty except for some regular headache pills. She looked surprised.
Really? And you searched the whole place?
The whole place. I even found the secret porn stash. Melinda pursed her lips.
I see.
Silence fell, and I couldn't think of anything to say. We stared at each other across the desk for a while. Then she shook her head irritably.
I don't like it, John. Not one bit.
Okay, but don't you think...
You're the one who pushed for this, not me. Why even bother searching his room? I already have enough information. He needs to go, plain and simple. What do you think would happen if the word got out that drugs are flowing freely at Bonita? Absolute disaster.
She threw her arms up and demonstrated how disastrous it could be. Clearly, I needed to come up with something good if I wanted to keep my assistant coach. Look, I understand the easy option is to just let Archie go. Sure, maybe some of the rumors are true, but I don't think it's a regular thing. We would have noticed.
Oh, come on. All those trips to Rio? You must have seen something, right?
My mind went back to one late night about a year ago. At a less than respectable bar, Archie had met with a sketchy guy, exchanging money for a small package and a clumsy handshake. However, this was probably not what Melinda needed to hear. So I just sighed in relief, thankful that Archie wasn't a drug user. No, never. Perhaps a few too many beers on occasion, but that's it.
So you say. Well, the entire affair troubles me deeply. You defending him is also disconcerting because I need to be able to rely on you.
She took off the glasses and placed them on the table. Then she fixed her green eyes directly onto mine.
Can I do that, John?
Absolutely yes. If there's one trait I possess, it's loyalty. With all due respect, Melinda, I hope you're not implying anything. I got a quick glance, then she executed another precise 90-degree turn and gave me a new opportunity at the perfect profile. As she inhaled deeply, her shapely chest rose and fell in a mesmerizing motion, and I struggled to keep from staring. Finally, she sighed disapprovingly.
No, of course not. I trust you. But do you remember what I said the first time we met?
Yes, that meeting was special. Fortuitous circumstances had put me on a plane to Brazil. I left a failed career as a professional tennis player and traded it for the luxurious life as a coach at Bonita Resort and Club. It would be hard to forget unless I underwent a lobotomy. 3 years had gone by since that day. After the small talk, she began explaining the job. It was likely the standard speech, but she made it sound sincere.
At Bonita, guests are treated to a unique and authentic experience, expecting only the highest standards, which we constantly strive to exceed. Our dedication to excellence extends to our culinary offerings as well. We have delicacies from around the world flown in, and our 2 master chefs, Antoine and Pierre.
She searched for the right words.
Let me put it this way. Many of the guests probably return year after year just because of those 2.
Of course, I knew who she was before I even went to Brazil. Lady Melinda Worth, wealthy as King Midas, and sole heiress to the Worth Empire after her sister Marina died in a car crash 20 years ago. The exact number of billions she had didn't matter. 1 or 100, it was still more than anyone could spend in a lifetime.
Maybe you're asking yourself what drives me to work.
Her question threw me. I had wondered, but it wasn't my place to snoop into other people's business. When I stayed silent, she went on.
It's a God-given law that we all must work. Regardless of wealth, we all need to push ourselves, get exhausted, and then come back and do it all over again the next day.
Now, at a critical point, she raised a finger.
So, obviously, I'm not doing it for the money. What matters to me is doing a good job. My father entrusted me with this responsibility, and I'm committed to fulfilling it as best as I can. You could say I'm dedicated to it. And the same is expected from my team. Working at Bonita is quite rewarding, but it can also get you a quick exit.
That was 3 years ago, and I had been in this exact chair, biting my tongue out of fear of saying something wrong, something that would make me miss my ticket to paradise. Now I leaned back in the chair and nodded thoughtfully. Yes, I remember what you said. Revolving doors. Hard to forget that speech.
Good. So, now I want to know how we're going to handle this?
I held up my hands. A couple of things. First, I'll have a serious conversation with him. If there's even the slightest hint we don't understand each other, it's a one-way trip back to England. No discussion. After that, any sign of trouble? Dramatically, I flicked away an invisible speck of dust in the air. Melinda didn't look convinced.
No, this decision isn't yours to make. You understand that, right?
Exhaling deeply, she shook her head.
It's not up to you,
She said. I understand, but...
John, it's not that complicated. Drugs? You're done. End of story. Before you walked in, I'd already decided to let him go. But, all right, I suppose I could reconsider. You're pretty convincing when you defend your friend.
Must be my boyish charm. She allowed a faint smile.
That charm has expired. But sure, I know the ladies have a soft spot for you. You're very likable.
A soft spot among the ladies?
I gave her a long look to see if she was one, but she met me with a neutral expression. When I attempted to speak, she cut me off with a hand. It fell silent while she thought about Archie's future. An irritated nod signaled that she had made her decision.
Okay. Against better judgment, I'm going to let myself be convinced this time. But don't let me regret it, John.
I let out a sigh of relief. Thank you so much. I know that.
You should know that you owe me,
She remarked, pointing her finger directly at my chest. Anything. I'll do it gladly. She left me hanging while considering the price tag, rocked back and forth in the chair a couple of times before letting her elbows rest on the tabletop, with the hands forming the classic power triangle.
Fine. I'll think of something appropriate. In the meantime, you could start by attending the charity event on Thursday.
No problem. I'll be there from start to finish. Obviously, she was aware of my intense dislike for these events, which, unfortunately, occurred quite frequently at Bonita. I hated it, parading like a dressed-up monkey before the guests. Although not specified in any contract, attendance was expected. So far, the events had been unbearable, making my eagerness on par with that of a turkey for Thanksgiving. With a curt nod, She signaled that we were done. I got up and extended my hand. Her handshake was very feminine, soft as a feather, and the grip barely noticeable. "You won't regret it," I said. She gave me a smile that probably would have made mincemeat of every man within 30 paces in her youth. Much of the magic was still intact, and I noticed my breathing getting heavy as she held me in her grip a little too long.
I know that, John.